my DDF instance, and I can start my slideshow as well. All right, so everyone, sorry for the delay, and thanks for coming to my presentation. I know that there is like Drupal Starship panels happen at the same time, really unfortunate, but so I appreciate that you are coming to listen to the CKEditor 5 presentation. Hi. All right. I am. My name is Nikolai. I'm a senior Drupal developer in Evolving Web, and I'm focusing on back, and that's the irony here. So I'm a backend guy who is presenting about front-end technology, but it actually makes sense because how I got involved into that, I was updating one of our sites from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10, which means that CKEditor 5 reaches end of life and it's not supported anymore. We had to use CKEditor 4, and we had to update to CKEditor 5. And we ended up like having a bunch of custom plugins, and some of them were replaceable by contrib, some of them are not. And I ended up like getting into this technology and working with the CKEditor 5 plugin development. So that's me. That's my company, Evolving Web. That's a sneak peek of our clients. There are like clients all over Canada, US, government, nonprofit, private sector, any kind of like clients, which means that we have very diverse teams of content editors like across our clients, and sometimes they have different demands. Some would be like more like they would more like be sort of changes friendly, which means that some plugins we can like keep, some plugins we can swap, but some would say no, we need this experience and we need that in CKEditor 5 exactly how we used to have in CKEditor 4, which is basically the reason why we got together and this one. All right, so I'm going to do an overview. Already started giving that. We'll start from defining a new CKEditor plugin in Drupal. So I assume that we are all familiar with Drupal, and we'll start from the part which is like better known, at least for me. So we'll start from the Drupal part, and then we'll look into the tools. That's the tools that we use for our development. It's super handy, so we'll talk about that, and then we'll be talking about plugin structure. And by plugin structure, I mean like mostly three parts, like editing plugin, UI plugin, and the common. Editing plugin, UI plugin, I call them plugins here, but think about them as parts of the plugins. They're called plugins only because they're like JavaScript class extending the plugin class, so that's why they're plugins. But they, in fact, they like are not like standalone plugins. They're just part of our plugin. And our plugin, by the way, is called demoLink. It's a link, but it's like a little bit different from the built-in link plugin. All right, so that's the repo. That's the module I'll be talking about. It's open source. It's in my GitHub. Maybe you can take a picture and try it out like yourself on your projects. So yeah, it's publicly available. You can use it. You can fork it. You can do whatever you want to do with the repository. Right. Here are some quotes that I picked from the CKEditor documentation, specifically from the migration section, which I like. CKEditor 5, the rich text editor with MVC architecture. I want to pay your attention on this MVC part. We'll get back to that later. Custom data model and virtual DOM. Compared to its predecessor, CKEditor 5 should be considered a totally new editor, and I cannot agree more. It's indeed a totally new editor. Every single aspect of it was redesigned. Yes. Integration features, data model, API. There is no automatic solution for migrating. That's the fun part. Any custom plugins for CKEditor 4 will not be compatible with CKEditor 5. Their implementation will be different and will require rewriting them from scratch. It's not me, it's like the actual like post from the documentation. So just a couple more words about the plugin. And yeah, by the way, I wanted to do a live demo, and nobody reminded me of that. Sorry about this. Let me just, yeah, it'll be. Okay, so here I have the vanilla Drupal then installation. And if I go to add content, basic page, I have, oops, I jumped the gun here. That's something we'll be talking about later. That's the CKEditor 5 inspector. That's a cool thing. That's one of the tools. But yeah, we have this button, which the pattern is the same as I have in my t-shirt. So it's called demoLink, as the tooltip says. When I click it, there's a form in the pop-up. This pop-up is called balloon. That's the name of the object in CKEditor. It has like 3 input forms: text, file extension, and URL. So I'll do demo extension, I don't know, .txt, and URL google.com. And I hit submit, and that's a link. So if I inspect source, it's A class demoLink, href, and 2 child elements: span class text and small class file extension. By the way, yeah, I'll be showcasing code like a lot in the presentation, so maybe it would be a good idea to move closer to the screen if you don't see that. And that's it. The difference between like my plugin and the built-in link plugin is those 2 child elements and the class, of course. But that's the class used to distinguish between the plugins. And if I go edit, the first child element text, it is, oops, it's required. The second is not. So yeah, now we don't have file extension, we have only span. Okay, I'll get back to the slides. So yeah, let's start from how do we integrate our plugin with Drupal. For now, we just like defining the new plugin in Drupal module. So that's the Drupal module file structure. That's the regular module, nothing fancy here. That has the info.yaml file as any module does, but it also has CKEditor 5 YAML file. We'll be looking into that in the next slide. And it defines the CKEditor plugin, it defines the library, the Drupal library that we use for the plugin. It defines the toolbar button, this button I click to create plugin instance, and the parent HTML element. That's the element we are attaching our plugin to. So library, that's the regular Drupal library, so it's minified JavaScript file, minified by Webpack, and it obviously has the source, that's our application, our plugin, and we use the source folder to create our minified JavaScript library. So that's how our YAML file looks like. That's very minimum, I would say. You can refer to the documentation to see all the possible variables and things you can specify in it, but the bare minimum would be like 2 sections, like CKEditor 5 and Drupal. CKEditor 5 is, we say demoLink, it's the name of the folder. This folder before the dot, and after the dot, that's the name of the class. And Drupal, we just like, that's a definition. We give label, we declare the library that we use, the actual JavaScript library, the minified plugin. We define the toolbar button, so we just like give it a name. We just say that, hey, we're going to be using toolbar button, and that's the parent element. So in that case, it means that we are attaching our plugin, our link to the paragraph. Like if I can think about in like specific example, let's say you want our plugin to work only in the table cell for some reason, you still can do that. But in most of the cases, that's the paragraph. Tools. First and foremost, Webpack, and nothing fancy here. Just like one thing worth to mention that you don't need to know the Webpack configuration in depth here. You can just copy it over from any kind of contrib module that provides a CKEditor 5 plugin. For example, CKEditor div manager. I just like went over, like copied the configuration using my module. I went through quite a bunch of modules that provide CKEditor 5 plugins just like to study them and to use them as an example, and all of them are the same, so we just like safely copy it over. Another one is more interesting one is the CKEditor 5 DevTools module. That's the Drupal module. You can download it from Drupal.org, and it has, in particular, like 2 interesting things. Thing number 1 would be a submodule, an example. So it's an example of the blocked widget plugin. That's the plugin you can find in the CKEditor 5 documentation on the official site. But the cool thing is that it's integrated in Drupal. So it has those like YAML files. It's slightly different. Like there is a little bit different way to import in files, how we do that in native CKEditor versus in Drupal. So the cool thing is that you have the working example of the plugin which you can refer as, well, as an example. And that's what I did when I was working on this module. And yeah, I did mention that this module I'm showcasing, that's actually a simplified version of the actual module we use for one of our clients. But just to make the code like easy to read and understand and not maybe too complicated, I created this like simplified version just like for demo purposes. So yeah, and another thing is something that you already had a sneak peek on is the CKEditor 5 inspector. It's this panel, and I can just like quickly maybe show it in. No, I cannot. I closed the site tab. Sorry, but that's the same thing basically. So it looks very much like Chrome DevTools, for example, but it is the JavaScript library. It's not the plugin extension. And imagine like how complex it is. What's cool about that is that that's the only way you can visualize the model. We'll be talking about model and view a lot in this presentation. Like think about the MVC pattern here, model view. So model resembles HTML, but it's not HTML. So there are differences. I'll be talking about that like a little bit further, but this inspector is the only way to visually inspect your model. So we have the parent element, we have 2 attributes, and we have 2 child elements. Yep. Okay, so that's the tools. Plugin structure. Any questions so far, maybe? No. Right. Plugin structure. So let's focus on the CKEditor 5 plugin application here. We have 2 folders, build and source. Build is the minified Webpack created file, demoLink.js, nothing fancy here. And the source is where we actually do our work. That's the application, that's the index.js, that's the editing plugin, UI plugin, comment, and anything else. Anything else, I mean that you are free to structure your application in the way you'd like to do that. But the convention is to have index file for obvious reasons, editing plugin, UI plugin, and the comment as different classes like scattered through different JavaScript files. You can kind of merge them together in one file, but why would you? So that's the convention. If you look into any like module from Drupal.org that provides CKEditor 5 plugin, you would find the structure in this. So some introduction, what is editing UI and the comment? They are 3 JavaScript files, 3 classes, and they are responsible for different things. Editing plugin, it does 2 things. First, it defines the elements hierarchy, which means that we define the structure. So we have like 1 parent element and 2 child elements, and we define attributes which are allowed in any element. In our case, it's just 2 attributes which we allow in the parent element. Second thing, it defines the mapping, like rules between model and the view. So model is the abstract data representation storage, something stupid analogy is like think about it. It's a database. It's not database, of course, it's all front end, but it's something where we store our data and where we operate on top of this data. That's the model, and view, that's how we represent the data. So it's the actual HTML. And we have some mapping in between them, so they may or may not correspond one-to-one. We'll talk about it a bit later. So that's the editing plugin. Two things: schema and conversion, which is mapping. UI plugin is responsible for toolbar button. You saw that already. It's responsible for the form. When we click the toolbar button, we see the form with 3 inputs. And it handles the selection. Selection is a tricky thing. It's not very obvious. CKEditor 5 is quite low-level framework. So as a Drupal developers, we expect some things to be, I don't know, like you define like form element, you say type, like submit, and you expect some sort of behavior attached to that. In CKEditor 5, not really. So some things you need to actually manually program and include in your code. So and selection is one of them. So when you need to like address the way how your plugin behaves when you put your mouse cursor in between your links, and when you hit the arrow buttons, you reach the boundary of the plugin, like what would happen? You should actually define it here. So I'll try to show it in the code. That's one of my last slides. And the comment, and we'll talk about the comment a little bit later, but comment use it to modify the data. So we collect the data in the UI plugin in the form, and then we pass it to the comment, and we do some stuff with this data in the comment. All right, so that's the index.js file. I'm not sure if you can see the code in here. I'll just try to explain what's going on here, like very high level. Index.js file is glues together two main parts of the plugin, which is editing and UI. So it requires editing and UI. They're imported from another files, and it gives the plugin name, demoLink, and that's it. And if you look into like other modules, like which provide CKEditor 5 plugins, their index.js would look more or less like that. Editing plugin. So it's, as I said, it's hierarchy, 2, it's mapping. Hierarchy and mapping. We have model and view. So model, and again, we're referring to MVC. Model is our data representation, and view is the HTML. A couple words about that. Model may not correspond to HTML one-to-one, which means that in our case it does. So we have like a parent element with 2 attributes, and we have 2 child elements. And the same thing we have in the HTML. We have a tag, attribute href, attribute class, and the 2 child elements, span plus text and small plus file extension. So it doesn't respond. But imagine you have, I know, external attribute in the model, and this external attribute you can sort of transform into the external class, to the target attribute, and you can add some, I don't know, font awesome icon like at the end of the link. So it would be like one attribute transformed into like 3 different things. So it's possible. In our case, like for simplicity, it corresponds to HTML one-to-one. And view is the HTML, but funny part that in the documentation they say that it could be something else. It could be XML or like Markdown or something you can imagine. But like we are in the context of web development, of course, it's HTML, so it's easy just to call it HTML. But just keep in mind that technically it could be something else, just like data representation. Schema, conversion, and comment. Again, I'm just rephrasing the hierarchy and mapping parts. It's just how it's called properly. So first is the schema. So that's where we are nesting the attributes, and where we are allowing we are nesting the elements and allowing the attributes. And conversion, it's the mapping. It could be from view to the models called upcasting, or from model to the view. I'm just, again, stupid analogy, from template to database, from database to template. But the principle is the same. And with downcasting, we can use 2 pipelines: editing pipeline, data pipeline. Data pipeline is the main one. It's how the end user will see our HTML code. But if you want to show extra elements for the content editor when they're, let's say, editing the node and they see the instance of the plugin, and you want to highlight it in yellow or show some tooltip only for content editor, just like it's not for the end user, just like some tips for the editor. Shit, I didn't report. Oh gosh.
It was blue before.
Sorry, that's my bad.
I think the red is so.
I just pressed it.
Oh, you just pressed it?
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
It was blue before.
Push it again.
It was blue before?
Yeah, I saw it blue for a while.
Okay, if you see blue, just let them know so you can push it.
All right. So yeah, like the takeaway here would be that we can like display HTML different to the end user and to the content editor. But in our case, we display the same HTML, so we use on the data pipeline. We don't use editing pipeline here. All right. Finally, like some code example schema. I'll try to explain it high level. So we have like we're registering like first parent element. We are given its name. We are saying inherit everything from an inline object. That's the schema built-in schema element built in the CKEditor. So like you can refer to the documentation and see what's exactly they're inheriting. But like in order like to keep it simple and inherit stuff from something else, we just like say inherit everything. But we override what we need. In our case, is we're saying that we allow only two types of attributes. URL and the demoLink URL and demoLink class, and we allow only two child elements, which would be demoLink text and demoLink file extension. Next example is how we register the child element. We say that it's allowed only in the parent element, not anywhere else. It could not exist without the parent element. It allows the content, so the content of its child elements is the same as the schema called block. That's something like built-in CKEditor file, and is limit attribute. I don't really remember for sure. I think it's when you. It's a go-to for all inline elements. Our link is an inline elements. When you put the cursor in the middle of the link and you hit enter, so it makes sure that your text is not displayed between multiple lines or something like that. So that's the example of the schema. It's not the whole schema, the entire schema that we use in the plugin, but that's just a part of it. Again, model in the view, and now the screenshots of the inspector. So that's the same element. As you can see, the structure, model structure resembles the HTML code. I hope you can see that. So we have, again, parent element, two attributes, and two child elements, which kind of transforms to the A class with two attributes and two child elements, as simple as that. It says that model is almost like DOM. So the structure is almost the same. The difference is that in CKEditor, it's allowed to apply attributes for elements as DOM does, and for text nodes. That's what DOM doesn't. But CKEditor model kind of does. We don't use that. Again, I cannot think about the use case of it, but it's kind of possible. But if we think about model as like DOM structure, that's more or less true. And view is the HTML. So we talked through the hierarchy. Now we're talking about the mapping part. How we have like model, we have the view. They are different. They could be different. They could resemble each other. They could not. They may not. And now we need to connect them. So that's the rules that we use to connect model to the view. In that case, it's upcast conversion. There is also downcast conversion. Upcast is view from view to the model. Imagine that we have, like on the side, we have the node already. It already exists. We hit enter. We hit edit. We see the node edit page, and we see the CKEditor. And CKEditor, at this very moment, it reads the data that it has, like in the node, and that's HTML, and it needs to create model from this HTML. So it reads HTML, it applies the rules, the conversion rules, upcast conversion rules, and it creates the model based on those rules. And model becomes the editor state, which means that all the further editing of the plugin, it happens on the model. We are not editing HTML. We are not editing what we see. We are editing the model. Model is it's our data. It's the array of elements and their attributes, and we are editing them. So that's the takeaway here. Downcast conversion looks a bit more scary. In fact, it's not when it's happening. It's happening when we are, as I said, we are editing the element, we are editing the model. Like imagine that we open the node, we clicked on the element, we see this form, and we enter the new value in the form, and this value gets saved in the model. But now we need to update the view. It's like you save the value in the database, now you need to update the template on your site, something like that. So you are updating the view with the downcast conversion. So there's like rules. It's separate rules, different rules from the upcast. Upcast and downcast, they're different like code snippets basically. But you need to create the view from the model. Editing downcast is something, as I said, if you want to see some extra information for the content editor. In our case, we don't use that, just neglect it. We use the data pipeline. But just good to know that if we need to show some extra information, that's the way to do that. It's basically another way, which you would say it's data downcast is editing downcast. That's it. In our case, we use it. That's how it looks in the code. Super simple. Upcasting from view to the model, from HTML to the data. We have span of class text. That's like an example how we convert the child text element, the one which is required. We have span text, and we use the writer, that's the object, the helper object, and we create model element with a name. As simple as that. We can make this piece of code like complex, complicated. We can add like extra logic if we need that, but that's for simplicity. The other way around is as an input, we have the model element, that's its name. We use a different writer. So it was like model writer, that's the view writer. And we like use this specific method to create span with a class text. It happens, conversion happens, like imagine that you didn't create your plugin with the form. You just like copied raw HTML and dumped it to the CKEditor, and you're in the source editing mode. You dump your code, you click the source, and now you force the CKEditor to show you the actual like representation of the plugin. That's where conversion happens. So that's yeah. And one more thing in here, we use element to element helper in here, which means that we take like model element and we convert it to view element, or the other way around. But it's element to element. There are also like element to attribute, attribute to element is all built in CKEditor. And that's another example, attribute to attribute. Like just to show you some like visual example of like different use case of conversion. So we are focusing on the attribute. This upcasting conversion means like from view to model. We are taking the href attribute and we are creating the model attribute called demoLink URL, and we are assigning the href value to the model attribute. And that's it for the editing plugin. UI plugin. The UI plugin is responsible for three things: button, form, and selection. Let's look at the button first. Here's the code to create a button. Basically, it's adding a new component into the UI object of the editor. So we are using the button view class. Button view class is used for any kind of buttons across the editor. It could be like toolbar buttons, it could be form buttons, anything which could be defined as a button. We're assigning the label, the icon, this an SVG file imported from somewhere else. We say that we want to see the tooltip. Then we are binding some properties of the form to the comment, which is enabled and is on. Is enabled is, you know, when sometimes your button is grayed out. Let's say you click the source mode in CKEditor and all your plugins are gray. You cannot use that. So that's the is enabled property responsible for. So you can add some custom logic here if like you don't want your plugin to be used within the table. Let's say you can add this code in here. And here I'm saying that take the comment. Comment is the separate object. Check is its is enabled property and assign this value to the button is enabled. So it's basically bind them together. So we are doing the logic in the comment, and form just uses this logic. And is on, I think it's when you're editing your plugin, your button is highlighted in blue. And that's what this property stands for. So in my case, if a comment has some value that's, like Drupal form API, form state, array, or object now in Drupal 8+. That's the same thing. That's the state of the form comment value. So if it has some value, it means that we are editing our plugin and we are highlighting our button in blue. And then when we hit the button, execute handler, we are showing the UI. Showing the UI, it means that we are showing this form with 3 input elements. That's the button. The form view. Think about this method as the same thing as where you define your form in Drupal. It's like form API, where you define 3 input elements. I use helper methods in here. CKEditor 5 is low-level framework, so I cannot showcase you all the boilerplate code, otherwise my presentation would be internal, would be endless. So I just move this code to make it more about to show you what's going on, what's the meaning of that, rather than show you all the boilerplate code. But that's the helper to create inputs. So we create 3 inputs. We create 2 buttons: submit button and cancel button. We specify the submit button is of the type submit. It touches some logic fit. And then we delegate the cancel event of the button to the cancel of the form. So there's some cancel event in the form, and this line is to say that when we hit the cancel button, we cancel the form. And wherever this cancel event handles, whatever code it has, it will execute it. The collection and the template is basically a way to render the form. Again, I kind of collapsed it, but it's a boilerplate code. We're creating specific CKEditor 5 object called collection, and we pass it to another specific CKEditor 5 object called template. If you go through different plugins from Drupal and see CKEditor 5 plugins and see how it's implemented, the form is implemented, that would be last 2 lines. Right, at this point, we just define the form structure. It doesn't do anything, it's just we just define the fields and 2 buttons, and that's it. In this piece of code, in this function, we are defining the submit handler and cancel handler. So it's the listener to the submit event of the form. So when the submit event happens, what we do, we collect 3 input values, and we pass it to the comment. So this editor executes demoLink. This demoLink it is the comment. We haven't talked about comment much, but important, the takeaway here, the important thing to note here is that what form plugin does, it collects the elements, the user input, and it passes it to the comment. And that's it. It doesn't modify the data itself. Its job is to pass it to the comment. So that's what it does. On the next line, we hide the UI. We hide the form. If we click the cancel, we don't pass the data. We just hide the UI. This piece of code stands for if we open the form, but then we clicked, I don't know, outside of the form, outside of this pop-up. It's called balloon, this pop-up, it's a balloon. Outside of the balloon, what we do, we just hide the form and do that. So at this point, we have the form. We define the submit logic. We define the custom logic. We define what's happened when we click outside of the form. But it's not instantiated. It just exists. We just defined how the class would work. Now we need to instantiate it. So as I said, CKEditor has the balloon. That's an object. When you add something to the balloon, balloon. When you add something to the balloon, it's displayed in this pop-up. So we are adding our form view object to the balloon, and we specify the position, how this balloon would be displayed. And this is, again, that's a boilerplate code. I copied from somewhere else, and it doesn't change from plugin to plugin. You can change it if you want your balloon to be displayed below your link for some reason. You can do that, but that's kind of thing which is kind of standard across different plugins. Then you load the comment. The comment is when you're gonna pass this this data to, or you can load the data from the comments. Let's say you're editing your existing link you had created before, you click on that link and you want to load this form, but you don't want it to be loaded like empty. You want to see the values in the form that you saved before. And that's what we do here. We extract these values from the comment. The comment is kind of the same thing as Drupal form state object, like the Drupal form API. So we loaded the comment. I did some mapping here to iterate through all those 3 fields in here that I have. So that's the iteration. I'm going through the comment values and then identifying if we have this value, like if it's empty or not, and I'm flagging it into the is empty variable. Then that's some like specific code for the URL. If the URL is empty, I'm just adding this like sharp symbol. Let's say that's our desired behavior. We just don't want this field to be shown empty. We want to add this like sharp symbol. And if it's not empty, if the value in the comment in our like form state is not empty, we just like extract it and we pass it to the form. So when the users edit in the form, they already see the pre-saved, the values saved before. So that's actually what editing is. They don't like see the empty form every time when they click the plugin. So yeah, that's what's happening here. So that's our form. I believe that's it for the form. The last thing the UI plugin is responsible for is selection, and I know the code is complex. I'll try to give just very high level overview in here. All of this is the listener for the selection change event. So every time you move around your mouse within the CKEditor, this event gets fired, selection change. So first, what we do, we extract the element from the selection. It's where your mouse is. If it's not our element, we just hide. We don't do nothing. It's not our responsibility. It's something else. It's a different plugin, right? But if it's our plugin, we want to show our form, which means that the user clicked on the link in the editor, and we want to show the form to the user so the editor is able to modify the values, right? So we show the UI. This complex piece of code is the positions. In our plugin, we have, I'll just remind you, we have the parent element, we have 2 child elements. And the first one is required, the other one is not. So we want to check if we have this last one, because it's not required. We may have it, we may not have it. We want to check that. That's where we check it. And then we pass it to before touch and after touch. How can I explain it? It's something built in the CKEditor 5. Again, low-level framework. Before touch is the position in between where your link, your first symbol of the link starts, and like the space, let's say, the symbol that was before that. That's the position before. After touch, that's the same thing, but like after the link. And what we want to say here, all this code was to identify this before touch and after touch, like think about the CKEditor window as the, I don't know, system of like X and Y axis or something, and there are like positions, right? And we want to identify where our element is and where the user mouse is. Or it may not be mouse, it may be like arrow keys, right? And the point here is when the user, with the arrow keys, let's say, they hit either before touch and after touch. So the selection does not stay within the link. It goes to the parent element, to the paragraph, so it goes outside of the link. It's very basic thing, and I would expect it to be sort of like plug and play. That this piece of code was needed to define this behavior. And again, if you want to dive into that, I have the repo, just like look into that, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. But I know that's kind of hard to explain during the presentation. We covered editing part, UI part, and now we're gonna talk about the comment. I don't have much time, unfortunately, but we don't have many slides either. So we use the command to modify the model. As I said, all the operations are happening on the model. And we need the command to collect the values, the user input from the form, and then we pass it to the command, and there where actual editing is happening. It's an JavaScript object. Well, yeah, object is a class file. It has two methods, refresh and execute. And first, refresh method, the naming is not very fortunate in my opinion, but they are opposite to each other. The refresh method, it updates the state of the command, our form API form state. And execute, it updates the model based on the command, based on our form state. Refresh method, that's the code. It's responsible basically for two variables. Is enabled, remember when I was showing the button is enabled was responsible for graying out this button. And here I cheated, I just said is enabled true, it's always true, it's always enabled, it's never grayed out. It's just again for simplicity, but you can add your logic in here depending on any kind of values the command has. I don't know if your values are empty, just gray the button out, you can do that. And then I'm rebuilding the value. So I'm saying it's no. I have the model in here. So I'm taking the values from the model and I'm updating the command. So I have the model with the latest values, right? I have the selection and I'm trying to find the element in the selection, if it's our element or not. If it's something else, we don't do anything. If it's our element, so yeah, we return nothing here. But if it's our plugin, we rebuild the value. I'm just saying that it's an empty array or object, but okay, array. I'm going through the attributes in here. So I have two attributes, demoLink URL and demoLink class. I'm getting the attribute values from the model. I'm assigning to the command. This value, this stands for command. That's it. I'm done with the attributes. And the same thing with the child elements. I have in my example two children for the link, text, and file extension. I'm iterating through them. I'm getting their value and assigning it to the command. So after this method got executed, our command, it has the latest values, our storage. The opposite method is the event listener. So when the model changes, when the user opens our plugin, does some modification, editing the values in the form, it gets passed to the command and the model has changed. We need to update when the values in the command change, we need to update the model list I suppose. A bit confusing, I know. So that's the event listener to the model change event. So we are looking for the element. If the user, maybe they changed other element, not ours. In that case, we don't do anything. If we didn't find our element, we just we create a new one. In that case, we create a new one. Here, two scenarios are possible. We are either creating a new element or we edit an existing one. And if the element does not exist in the selection, it means that we are creating a new one. So here we are creating. Then we edit values. Again, some boilerplate code is quite long to include in the presentation. We don't have much time already. So that's the shortcut, basically. I'll briefly show this method. And if it's a new element, we have to insert it to the model. If it's an existing one, it means that it's already been inserted, we just edit. That's the last slide of my presentation. That's the sneak peek of this edit element method. It's basically where we clear model attributes, we set new model attributes based on those values we pass in here. We pass it from here. So that's the values that we have in the command. We need to update the model, so we pass those values and we recreate the model in the proper way. Again, we have all the freedom we need, all low-level operations, and we recreate our model. So first I'm dealing with the attributes in here. I'm saying it's an empty array. I'm getting attributes from the values variable, demoLink URL, demoLink class. It stays the same, it's hard-coded. We don't need to load it from attributes, we just hard-code it, and derive the attributes to the model. And that's it with attributes. And then the same thing but for child elements. I'm going through the model child element, demoLink text, demoLink file extension. Unfortunately, that's boilerplate code once again. So you can, and it's quite long. You can see that on in the repo. But just what it does, it recreates a model element based on the latest values, and it attaches those values in the proper way. In our case, we want our text to go first, our file extension to go later, not the other way around. So we attach the text, we attach the file extension. At this point, we have our model updated. I hope it was helpful. That's it. I don't know if you have any questions. I know it was overwhelming.
So when you created this module, like when you started it, you said you boilerplate. Is that like the same as like the drush generator that is used to do the same function?
Unfortunately, no. You can generate the Drupal module with drush generate module,
Yeah.
but it will generate you the structure for the module, right? All the CKEditor related code, unfortunately, drush is not integrated with that. It would be amazing actually if you could generate the whole like thing, and you would just like need to customize your like schema or conversion or stuff like that, but it's not happening.
No.
That's what I said before. It's very handy to have examples, right? And the CKEditor 5 DevTools, that's the module name. It has this example provided with you, so you can just like install it with Composer and just like look into that and copy some pieces of the code in your module. But yeah, unfortunately, you cannot generate it, at least not yet.
How did you, the CKEditor inspector, how did you install it?
It comes with the module, with the contrib module. It's not something you have to install like specifically because it's included in the CKEditor 5 DevTools module. You can find it on Drupal.org. It's just like CKEditor 5 _ dev _ tools. I think that's how it's spelled. And it's a sub-module, so you download the CKEditor 5 DevTools module, you look into that, there's like another like modules folder, and there will be, I don't remember how it's called, but it's just on the one sub-module. You enable it and you have this demo like example plugin available in your CKEditor. So you go to your like text formats, you see all the plugins available, you can drag it into your CKEditor and see how it works. And here you can use, by the way, inspector to inspect how the model looks like. So you not only looking at the like UI, but you looking sort of like in the guts of the plugin and the structure. So the model in particular, so you know how it works. But yeah, it all comes from the CKEditor 5 DevTools. And by the way, one of the reasons I decided to publish it into the repo and do this presentation is to provide the developers with another example, because more examples is better, right? And it's simple enough to kind of study all the patterns and see the logic, how like different CKEditor parts like interact with each other, because it's like actual plugins which like do the actual job. It's just a simple link and that's it, but no functionality attached to it. But like more complex solution, it's kind of hard to read the code when you have no experience with CKEditor development. And my plugin is simple enough to just like overlook the code and get an idea what's going on in here. So that's basically the reason why it's published and why I'm here. Okay, I think today. That's it. If you have no any question, no other questions.